This is the Last Minute Blues Podcast with Alex Ferrario, Donnie Fandango, and Jeremy Rutherford on 101 ESPN.
The Last Minute Blues Podcast is presented by Blue Note Roofing. Roofing, siding, and gutters. Your St. Louis roofing experts. Visit BlueNoteRoofingSTL.com for free inspection.
Welcome. A new episode of the Last Minute Blues Podcast is brought to you by Blue Note Roofing, roofing, siding, and gutters. Your St. Louis roofing experts. Visit BlueNoteRoofingSTL.com for a free inspection. Getting things off in fine style today.
A-plus start.
A-plus. We're in the Jeff Burton studios. I've got Alex Ferrario to my left from 101 ESPN. Right diagonal from me, our dude Jeremy Rutherford from The Athletic. Gentlemen, it's really great to see you. It's always great to be here. I love being in this studio. When we had to flirt with being in the other crappy one, there was legitimately a sleeve of crackers on that board.
I started to sweat because I walked over to it and I'm like, oh God, I haven't done this one in 6 months.
Yeah. So we have a lot of stuff to talk about with our Blues, but I want to begin specifically with the game last night against the Capitals.
Oh,
all right.
Yeah, this is going to be Donnie fired up right here.
So first of all, I was kind of thinking about this when I went to bed last night. I feel like a handful of years ago that randomly when the Blues would play the Ottawa Senators or something, it was just like these two teams were in the same division and they hated each other. Did the Blues have something with Ottawa, or am I completely making that up?
I don't remember Ottawa.
Anyway, so there would be no real reason why there should be a whole lot of bad blood between the Blues and the Caps, but holy Lord, baby Jesus, last night, whatever it was on display, and there's so much to talk about here, but I think the place that I want to start, and we can bounce around, is how the Blues responded as a team when things got physical. Mm-hmm. You saw, I don't know that I have ever seen Robert Thomas jump into a pile like that. That was unbelievable. So as we're sitting here, right, not going to make the playoffs, but the team is on fire. Things like that get me so excited about this team going forward, to see them friggin' fight for each other like that. Do I make too big of a deal out of that?
I don't think so.
No,
I did have to look down. Is that number 18? Does that say 1-8 on the back?
For 28. I'm like, is that 28?
120. All
fighting right now?
Yeah, you look down there and it's Holloway, Snuggerud. And how about Snuggerud after the game? He says that when he cross-checks Wilson, he goes, yeah, probably not my best decision.
I was hoping he said that I cross-checked him and didn't realize who it was. He was like, oh, crap, Tom Wilson. I think that's a really good thing. I think the first thing you need to have when you're a team that is not connected is to find something to rally around. And that was the first time it felt like this season that actually every single guy on the ice was going out there to do something for the other guy. Mm-hmm. The moment Snuggerud got bumped into, you saw three guys immediately dart over there when Snuggerud threw the cross check. And that's DNA right there. That's a team, that's camaraderie, that's what you want, that's fighting for each other. And I thought it was even more impactful that it was Robert Thomas, because it's one thing when Tyler Tucker does it, it's another when Dylan Holloway does it. Those guys have shown the ability to do that before. But when guys do something out of the ordinary, I think that really opens up eyes. Four Nations last year, when Colton Parayko got in the fight, I think everybody on Team Canada was like, is it Colton Parayko fighting right now? That's what I
say 55.
Yeah, I think this guy stole a jersey and put something else on. But that's when you get that type from the other people. And let's be very honest about this. There's been tons of conversation probably since the deadline of, is Robert Thomas enough to be a captain? Have we seen enough to where you can understand him getting the C? I'm not saying fighting is the end all be all, but when a guy goes out there and jumps right in for his teammate and doesn't really care what the outcome's going to look like, yeah, that's leadership.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting? We talk about these young players so much. We're so excited about, Jimmy Snuggerud and Dalibor Dvorsky and these guys. But I think one thing that we probably don't talk about enough is that for years and years with the Blues and with other teams around the league, there's always that older core, then there's a younger core coming in. And for a couple of years, there's kind of a mix of the two, right? Mm-hmm. And so they're a team, they're wearing the same jersey, they come out of the same locker room. But, the Sundqvists and the Thomases are from, the Stanley Cup team. They won together. They have a tie to that team. And then you have these younger guys who are coming in. They don't really know that. And they're kind of being told that and learning what the organization's all about. Well, what the Blues are doing is going with that age bracket. Let's just say 23 to 25 or 26. These guys are all playing World Juniors against each other. They're being drafted together in the first round. You know, they're texting each other all the time, even before they got to St. Louis. Like, I would talk to Jimmy Snuggerud for a story while he's at University of Minnesota, and he'd say, yeah, I saw Dalibor, I texted him. You know, you got Dvorsky and Stenberg have their relationship that goes back. So where I'm going is that, you know, yes, you have good young players in the system, but you're creating like a brotherhood of these guys where they're all attached, whether it's because of their draft year or because they live together or whether they're the same age. So I think that's what you're starting to see. And I know last night, you know, not normal to have a situation like that, but you saw a lot of those guys jumping in.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you guys see Robert Thomas after the game last night? Is he okay?
Yeah, Jim Montgomery said he was fine. I mean, that was really a nasty
scary
hit. Yeah, I think a lot of people were focused on his head hitting the ice, and it's understandable. But man, I don't know if you guys caught it. His arm got caught underneath him, and it fell awkwardly too. And it's like, God, like that could have been a nasty injury. But I know they said he was clear and he was fine afterwards.
Monty just shook it off. He said, "Yeah, past a concussion protocol," which is the first thing that you think about. I didn't see the arm, other than the fact that, like Jim Montgomery said afterwards, he had no way to brace himself.
Yeah.
You know, it was a, WWE body slam, which I'm waiting for Donnie to raise the decibels here.
We're coming.
And, you know, he falls and, like, can you imagine you're going down the ice? You got nothing to stick out.
Well, okay, a couple things here real quick. I don't watch as much hockey as you guys, but I do feel as though I watch a lot of hockey.
Watched a lot of hockey.
And I was texting my oldest son during that. I don't know that I've ever seen something like that sort of takedown that Pierre-Luc Dubois did last night. I mean, if that dude, what do you think? He's got to be getting at least 3 games for that?
I asked Joe last night on postgame, and Joe said, I don't think he gets suspended at all. He said, I think he gets fined. I know because they gave him that intent to injure match-in penalty that he has a phone hearing no matter what, but that doesn't mean he gets a suspension. Yeah. The way that Joe framed it, and Joe said, like, look, you could tell he was trying to injure him because he grabbed a hold of him and threw him down. But Joe's like, it's a really awkward play because, Thomas does interfere with him, and I know Monty had a different opinion, but like Thomas got in front of him, Luc Dubois bumped into him, and his stick got caught in the groove of the skate.
Yeah.
So you can't get the stick out, and so Joey said that, he's trying to pull the stick out, and then he wraps around him, and I think it's just a matter of you start to fall, and there's really no opportunity. Now, he didn't have to bear hug him the rest of the way and slam him to the ice, but Joe said that it's probably a fine, but he didn't think it's a suspension.
And also, too, he probably doesn't have any prior
I don't think he's got a history of it.
That guy doesn't have a prior history of playing a full 60-minute game virtually freaking ever. So he's definitely not going to be, probably doesn't have a...
Here we go, Alex. Here we go.
We haven't gotten to the game yet. We're going to get
and also, too, he got a 5-minute match penalty. A lot of times when you get hit like that, there isn't typically... more. Sometimes there is, obviously, but if they miss the penalty and he didn't get called, then something might happen.
I was also fascinated to listen during the broadcast that was only the 3rd match penalty in the NHL in the entire year this year.
Well, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, Gudas was one, and then most recently was that AJ Greer hit on Zari from Calgary. Now, I could be totally off on that, but I think those are the other 2 that had the match penalty.
All right, so listen, I understand that when it comes to most NHL fans, I'm going to be preaching to the choir on this one. I hate Tom Wilson's face. I hate seeing him. I understand exactly his point. I understand that as a fan of the other team, I'm supposed to hate him. But sir, when you're going after 21-year-old, 155-pound soaking wet Jimmy Snuggerud, you are a chickenish. That is exactly what you are. And I think that it is hilarious in the penalty box that they kept showing. God, I wish I could have heard what they were saying. But Jimmy just had this freaking smirk on his face while Wilson was bark, 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 bark. And Snuggerud was like, literally seemed like he was eating it up. I loved it so much. And I know that this is also part of Jimmy Snuggerud learning how to be a great NHL player. They're coming for you, brother. But like, I hate that Wilson went after a guy that he knows that he could mop up the freaking floor with if he wanted to more than anything else. But again, if Tom Wilson was a Blue, I wouldn't hate it.
And that's
I wouldn't hate it.
That's
man.
where I hear everything that you're saying. I think everybody agrees with you. I'm watching that and you hate it, but then on the fact it's like, yeah, but if that dude was on my team, I'd love that guy. Because isn't that his job?
Yep.
Isn't his job to go out there and basically disrupt what was taking place on the ice, right? Like, you got to get in. The line that was dominating that game for the longest time was Thomas, Holloway, and Snuggerud. Snuggerud scored the goal. What do? You go out there and you get in the mind of Snuggerud. You get in the mind of the other guys. Guess who I just put in the penalty box? Like, it's a smart move by Tom Wilson, and he never did anything dirty.
No,
like, that's why I was fine with it. Like,
Not this time.
Yeah, not this time. But like, that's why it's like, oh, okay, yeah, he threw a hit. Like, Snuggerud's got to know. I mean, he said it afterwards. It's like, yeah, it's just me learning the game that when I score goals, people are coming for my head. But like, I don't know. I personally was like, I love Tom Wilson. I think he's hilarious. He's made dirty plays in the past. I also think he plays his role to a T. Like the Kachuk brothers, they don't do it as dirty as Tom Wilson's done in the past, but they go in there and disrupt. Brad Marchand goes in there and disrupts.
You know, more than anything else, I wish that I could have been sitting behind that penalty box.
Oh, yeah. I wish I was the guy in the penalty
For
box.
$425.
It would be worth it to be able to chirp that man. And I would have to come up with some good ones, obviously, on the spot.
I need to know what the top chirp is for Donnie.
And I'd have to sort of think about it for a bit. And it would probably be nothing, obviously, that would bother this man who has probably heard the worst of the worst from NHL fans everywhere. But God, I would have just absolutely loved that. But anyway, I mean, it was just wonderful to see. Like, it was just, man, again, as we're not looking at the playoffs again, we have questions about this offseason, about who's going to be here, who's not going to be here. You have a game like that last night, and man, like, it just makes you feel like everything's going to be all right.
Hey, I remember Tom Calhoun telling me a story one time where, he used to be in that penalty box area doing the PA.
He had the best gig in that spot.
Yeah, the best. and I don't know all the details. All I remember, and I would love to see Donnie in this situation, sitting like in row 4 behind the penalty box. Bob Probert goes to the penalty box for a fight, and whoever is barking at him in the crowd, he said that Probert went to climb the glass. He was trying to get to the guy or say something.
I would have thrown my beer and ran out of the stadium.
So I want to say this. I want to say this really quick. All right. Way back in the day, in the arena days, I used to be friends with the chief of police of Florescen's son. I think Dave Lowry was my buddy's name. And so on New Year's Eve, his dad got us tickets to see the Blues and the Islanders again at the old building. And these tickets were directly behind the Islander penalty box, literally row 1 right there. Okay. So I don't remember how you'd say his first name, but Uwe Krupp, Uwekurpp, I believe. Yep. Big old freaking fella. He gets into it with Kelly Chase, and they fight literally almost right in front of us, which we are losing our minds. It's the greatest, right? Well, so then we're right behind that Islanders penalty box, and Krupp comes in and takes his helmet and slams it on the glass against, like, right in front of us, and drops his gloves, and then him and Chase are barking back and forth, and I couldn't hear like anything that they were saying, but I was just like, oh my God, this is the greatest 5 minutes of my life. Like, I remember too that Krupp was like huge, or at least it felt like that. Like, it was just something else.
My dad still tells this story when he was at. This wasn't behind the penalty box. He was behind the bench for the opposing side. It was in the playoffs when the Blues played Dallas. I think it was 96 or 97. And my dad was just giving it to the players that entire game. And he said he really picked on Mike Keane the whole time. And then I think I told you this story.
You told me this. This is amazing.
And then so like he's just barking at these guys, and like they were the whole time. And then at the end of the game, Dallas must have scored an overtime game winner. And as they're walking off the ice, Mike Keane looks up at my dad and goes, "What do you got to say now, fatty?"
Oh my God.
My dad. I'm like, this is the best story in the world. Just the fact that you turned around and
that you made it. You know what I mean?
Oh God.
I just can't picture Ern chirping behind.
Oh my God. He said he was relentless. It was him and his buddy from work. They would just go in there and they would just rag on these guys because who was at the old arena, and you're like right there.
Yeah.
But he said, he's like, oh God, he's like, I hate the fact that they scored, and then it called me fatty afterwards.
Yeah. And then if Tom Calhoun's listening or whatever, he can tell me the true story. But the way I think it ended was Tom grabbing Bob Probert's jersey and trying to pull him back. And he said Probert turned and looked at him and said, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I don't know." I'm sorry.
Of all of the guys that I'm not doing that to, Mr. Probert, go ahead. You do it.
I mean, I guess if you're Tom, what are you going to do, Bob? You going to punch me?
All right. So I do want to ask this specifically about Robert Thomas. Guys, it seems as though since the trade deadline that, I heard you talking about it this morning with TMA. Did this light a fire under Robert Thomas? Are we getting a different Robert Thomas that maybe we have not yet seen before? Does this Robert Thomas want to prove that he should be the captain of this team over Jake Neighbors right now?
I think there's an element of that, yes, for sure. I think it's twofold. I think that he is healthier and he's producing, and so we're seeing a better Robert Thomas. And we're also seeing a guy who has a chip on his shoulder. Like, it just came out of the blue, I think, not just with the public. I think it came out of the blue that the Blues wanted to trade him to him. Mm-hmm. And I think that when you realize that, and realize that, hey, I signed up for 8 years and want to win here, and all of a sudden they think I'm not part of this. Yeah, I think that's going to drive you in a different way. I also think there's a lot of chatter about Jake Neighbors being the captain, and I think that has probably filtered back to Robert, maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, who knows, but definitely now. And it just seems like he's presenting himself differently. Like it's not that he wasn't willing to be available before, but now he just seems more of a spokesperson than he was before. And, where this is going to lead, we don't know. Could it lead to him staying with the team and wearing the C next year? It could, but I think that would be a reverse course of what the Blues' intentions are, as they showed us going to the deadline. And maybe if Doug were listening, he'd say, look, we're going to listen to all trades. It's not that we were going to trade Robert. They never went to him and asked him to waive the no trade clause. But the fact that you were entertaining the idea of trading Robert Thomas kind of speaks to where you're. And I
guess at some point you just want to see, like, hey, this team's been bad for 4 years. They've been inconsistent. Let's see what somebody's willing to offer. And then if nobody meets what you want, then you look at it and you say, well, this guy was better last year. Joey has told this story before, and he said he always talked about his time in Arizona, and he said, Shane Doan was one of the best captains that he ever played with the Arizona Coyotes. But he said for the longest time in Arizona, when they were going through all of those losing seasons, he's like, it was hard for any of the young guys to really showcase their personality or take over who they were, because this is the captain. This is the guy. This is who we all have to let run things, and we just kind of lay low and do our own thing. And he's like, that moment that Shane Doan retired, it's like a lot more guys were like, oh, okay, now it's my team. Clayton Keller, Nick Schmaltz. And then they've just kind of continued to evolve from there. And I do wonder if that was a little bit with Robert Thomas. I'm not saying this was all because Braden Shen and Justin Falk were here, but sometimes guys don't feel the necessity to let it all out because there's somebody else that's doing that. And then they can just kind of go about their business and do their own thing. And now it feels like that Robert Thomas is the guy. He's the number one. He's the face. There's this like push with it. I do think there's something to what JR said, to where it's like, look, when you find out you're going to get traded, or there was a chance you were going to get traded, it does light a fire. I also think what plays into this is he's got guys that think on the same level as him. Like, I've never believed that Thomas and Kyrou mesh well on the ice. I feel like they're two different styles. I think Thomas and Buchnevich meshed well, but I think they were always searching for that other piece. Now, you not only have that shot player with Robert Thomas and Jimmy Snuggerud, but you've got Dylan Holloway, who is just tenacious on the puck. I think you're seeing Robert Thomas perform this way because he finally has weapons that can utilize what his best assets are. I guess my biggest question is, if that was their intentions, does his performance, or can his performance, change their mind of what they were looking to do in the offseason? Because the biggest thing, and I know we've talked about it, is, man, if you don't have Robert Thomas, I don't know if you have Snuggerud and Holloway doing what they're doing.
All right. Okay. And then also to follow up to this, Are you guys worried? One of the things that I am concerned about is a bridge burned between the Blues and Thomas, or maybe even the Blues and Parayko. Is that something that you concern yourself with?
Yeah, sometimes I think we can look into that a little too far in terms of, they understand it's professional sports, but I agree with that sentiment, because the polish wears off a little bit, right? When you get drafted by the Blues, and every time you see that blue note, you think that's my team. That's my team. And now there's a 2% feeling inside you that that's the team that tried to trade me or wanted to trade me. So I think that wears off. But, if you have a sit down with Robert Thomas, Doug Armstrong, Alexander Steen, hey, look, did we talk about trading you? Yeah, it was a great package. It didn't go through. You know that. We didn't ask you to waive your no trade clause. After that surgery, you really played well, and we like the way that you stepped up and kind of took on that leadership. We like the development that you're providing for Snuggerud and Holloway, and we're gonna hang on to you. You want to be a part of this thing? Yes. Okay, let's go. Let's go. And I think if you have that moving forward, things can change quick. Once those talks are had, yeah, it's not totally the same, but I think if you get everybody on the same page, it can work out.
Well, and that's the thing I have to imagine they're trying to evaluate. It's like, why does it have to be a threat every year to the players of, hey, everybody's going to get traded, and then they start to turn it on, right? Like, that's the mindset that I would imagine Doug and Steen are thinking, because 3 of the last 4 years, we've heard the same sentiment of, well, we're going to make changes if this team continues to play this way. And then when the actual trade potentially could happen, it's the eye-opening moment where it's like, whoa, wait a minute. So that's where I guess, and that's why they have such the hardest job in this scenario, because you have to judge like what you're hearing from him. If he says he wants to be on board with this, and you say, well, we need you to be 100% into it for 82 games next season, how much do you buy into that? But I mean, you can't deny what they're doing on the ice. I've brought these numbers up a lot. Since the Olympic break, they now have 43 points, that line of Thomas, Holloway, and Snuggerud, and they're a plus 43 on the ice.
Whoa.
So you've got 43 points, which I believe is 7th most in the National Hockey League since the Olympic break of any line combination, and a plus 43 is the best plus minus of any line combination in the NHL. Like, you can't deny what they're doing. It's going to be, and I don't know, how much does the bridge being burned, how much is that a thing if Doug Armstrong's not the one in charge next year? That's the other question I'd have.
Yeah, that's
a good point.
Because if Steen's taking over, it's a different voice. And I'm not saying it's the same scenario, but we all saw what happened with Buffalo once Kevin Adams wasn't in charge and Yarmo took over. It's like everybody took a deep breath. And again, I'm not making this like this is all on Doug Armstrong, but I do wonder if he's not the one that's making those decisions, does that bridge potentially being burned changed a little bit?
Yeah, I think it could. I guess the only thing is, it would take Alexander Steen going to Robert Thomas and saying, hey, I believe in you.
Yeah.
And also, Doug's going to be here on paper contract, 3-year deal. So you would hope that those two are in lockstep with any decision that they were making at the trade deadline.
Right.
So does Robert, think twice about that?
That makes sense.
Yeah. Well, we got plenty more on the last minute. We went really long in that first segment.
Look at us go.
Yeah, I mean, that was top notch. So, to pat ourselves on the back, that was great. And there was no reason to stop. But we got to get on to segment number 2, Last Minute Blues podcast. More coming next. All right, so JR, you just did a piece a couple of days ago in The Athletic where you did your Blues power rankings. And I want to kind of pick apart some of those 10 on the podcast because they were things that I wanted to bring up anyway. First and foremost, and we talked about them on the last podcast, but we got to continue to talk about the play of Logan Mailloux. That pass last night.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, baby, was ridiculous.
Ken Wilson
over here. So I just want to know specifically what you have seen of this young man as this season has gotten to this point. What are you seeing now from Logan Mailloux that you were not seeing back in October and November?
I mean, mine's confidence. I mean, to me, I'm seeing a guy that looks like a top 4 defenseman. He plays just as well as he does in the offensive zone as what a guy like Broberg or Parayko do. But defensively, I mean, yeah, he makes a couple of mistakes. Like last night, the puck gets in between his legs and he turns into a 2-on-1 the other way for Washington. Those are going to happen for a younger defenseman.
That would happen to me on every shift.
That would happen to me even when I'm not on the ice. That's how bad I would be at that. So, those happen. But, I mean, the ability to recover for Logan Mailloux and how better he plays in front of his own net, how he moves the puck out of the zone with efficiency, and then him and Broberg, I mean, their offensive zone time numbers that they have built up since the Olympic break, I mean, it's like plus 50% where they're in the offensive zone more than they're in the defensive zone in terms of them being on the ice. So to me, I think what you're seeing from Logan Mailloux is why they entertained the idea of trading Colton Parayko, because Logan Mailloux looks like he's comfortable now being in the top 4. And it's funny, last night or a couple of days ago when he was talking about how, look, this is just my first full season in the NHL. So yeah, there's more to touch. I made this comp on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. That's what Broberg was before his first full season with the Blues, where it was like, hey, he just partially played in the NHL and then made that last stretch, and then he got to be that NHL number 1 defenseman.
Donnie, we had Logan Mailloux in the locker room a couple days ago, kind of like a 2-minute scrum in front of his locker. And I think one of my questions, Alex, I think you heard it, I sent it to you, was along the lines of just, what has led you to go from where you were? I made it sound like he was a deadbeat to where you were, like to where you are now. And then he answered the question. They all, understand and answer the question. But for whatever reason, this time I felt the need after the microphones walked away, to say, hey, listen, when I say that, I'm just like fans wonder, because you've really come a long way. So I don't want it to make it sound like
and he said, screw you, JR.
Deadbeat at the beginning of the season.
Where you were.
And he goes, no, believe me, I get it. Like, I get it. But yeah, like he has come a long way, and that's what fans are excited about, wanting to know, how it happened. And, you could break it down every way to Tuesday, but the just the one thing is I just saw him early on in the season as a guy who's, okay, I'm playing third pair, I'm getting 12 minutes, 13 minutes, and hopefully I don't make any mistakes. And now you see him playing top pair with Philip Broberg, power play, making passes through the seam to Snuggerud. And at the end of the night, he's got 20 minutes and assist or 2. And you're talking about him being in the top 4. That's how far he's come.
Yeah. He looks like he's not second guessing every time he's got the puck on his stick.
It's really incredible how you kind of sort of see it progress, because even as a novice, you could tell that there was just that extra split second where it was going through his mind. And now that is not even the case. He's just moving with everything. It's really unbelievable to watch. Theo Lindstein, where are we at with him, boys?
I like his game. I mean, I don't see mistakes. Like, to me, he reminds me a lot of what Carl Gunnarsson used to be, to where it's like when he's on the ice, you just don't notice him. And honestly, if you're talking about, 21, 22-year-old defenseman who is playing his first full season in North America, if I don't notice you on the ice in an NHL game, dude, that's a win. But you don't notice him in the defensive end, but you do notice him on the offensive side of things. I mean, he jumps into the rush. He gets pucks on net. Sometimes he'll find himself below the goal line, which might not be the best thing in the world for a defenseman, but I don't know, I don't know what his ceiling is, because I think a lot of people see it was a former first-round pick, and there's like, oh, man, what could you get out of this? He is not a liability on the ice. And, to me, for getting your first full season in the NHL and you're generating offense while playing second pair minutes with Colton Parayko and being fine out there, I mean, to me, that looks like a guy that can be a top 6 for you next year.
Yeah, and I know people know this, but I think it's worth repeating. That's what fans should be focused on, is these guys getting the games and getting the experience. And I'm just going to use Lindstein as an example. I talked to him a couple minutes the other day, and I said, listen, and sometimes these guys might have a little clue that they're going to come up and get some games towards the end of the year. And I said, any clue whatsoever? He goes, absolutely none. Thinking I'm going to finish the year in Springfield. I can't emphasize enough what it means to a 21-year-old.
Yeah.
20-year-old.
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 God, that's even crazier.
Yeah, to be in Springfield, get the call, come up, and play 18, 19 games with Colton Parayko. It changes everything. It shows you, I can play in this league. It shows me this is what I need to work on. When I go back home to Sweden in the off season, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. When you fly back over here for training camp, I could be a part of this thing. It just changes everything. And if he were to fall on his face when he came up here, then it would be different. He's not falling on his face.
All right. So let me ask you guys this, though. With the possibility of Juracek joining the lineup and joining the team next year, would you at all be concerned about the amount of youth on the back end for the Blues?
I guess it depends on what direction they're going. If you're going in a rebuild direction, meaning taking a step back, and in this scenario, we're talking about Robert Thomas and Colton Parayko being gone. No.
Okay.
I think the experience is what matters. Now, you don't want to bring them into an environment that's just losing, which is going to be the hard part that you're going to have to juggle. But for a guy like Jiricek, I think that's why I would be more likely to keep Colton Parayko. Because if next season I've got Broberg and Fowler, and then you've got Lindstein, and you've got Mayu, and then you're bringing in Adam Jiricek and still have Tucker and whom not, like, I'm going to need a guy like Colton Parayko to cover for a guy like Adam Jiricek. And let's look at Adam Jiricek the same way we looked at Logan Mayu. It might take a little bit in the NHL. He might have to go down to the American Hockey League for a stretch of games, depending on where his confidence is at. So, yeah, I think Jiricek and Lindstein are making a really strong case to be a part of the team next year. But I think because of how many young guys you'd have in your top six, I'd be more likely to keep a guy like Colton Parayko, so I have that veteran presence around.
And I hear you. And, here's what I think about with this topic. If you move a Colton Parayko and or Robert Thomas, like, I'm all for this retool, youth movement type thing.
Yeah.
But how do you do it if, I'm just throwing this out there, that Dalibor Dvorsky is your top line center, or whoever? Maybe you bring somebody back in a Robert Thomas trade who's your top line center, but he's 22 years old, 23, whatever. And then Jiricek and Mayu are your top four next year. I think it's a little bit premature. Like, hey, bring Jiricek in. Maybe he surprises you. Maybe all of a sudden he looks like a number one right out of the gate. So I think that they just have to be a little bit careful with not, overdoing it with the young guys. Because even though these young guys are talented and they're showing it right now, you still have to have that guy who can point you in the right direction.
And you don't want to ruin those guys too. Like, you don't want to put them in there into a losing environment to where their minds are lost in terms of like, oh man, this is rough and I can't play up here. Kind of like what Mayu was early on. Like, you don't want to bring them into that environment where it's every night you're expecting to lose.
Yeah, good point. So let's say that they bring in Jiricek next year and you put him, I'm just making this up, but he's top pair, Mayu's second pair, and this is how they're rolling. And now Jiricek struggles. Well, you can't, what do you do? Like with Mayu, you could send him to AHL, bring him back up, shelter him a little bit, and help them. And you can't do that if you just, load up 6D, Broberg and the young guys.
Yeah.
As I was reading the article, I got sad when I got to, I believe it was number 6.
Way to go, Jer. You made him sad.
And it was talking about Jordan Binnington. And, I again heard John TMA this morning talking about Jordan and how going into next year, Binnington's a proud guy, probably not going to be somebody that wants to be a backup here to Joel Hofer next year, which I completely understand. But then, man, I just got real sad thinking about Binner being somewhere else. That said, let me ask you dudes this question. Is Jordan Binnington the best goalie in Blues history?
Yes. In my opinion, he won a Stanley Cup, so yes.
Period, point blank, end of story. That was the one.
Yes, and I'll take it one step further. I mean, they've had great goalies, right? Curtis Joseph, Grant Fuhrer, Mike Liu.
Yeah. Glenn Hall.
Roman Turek.
Hey, from the Red Line.
Good season.
Yeah. So they've had a lot of good goalies. And, Alex, says Stanley Cup. Okay, that's first and foremost, right? But when you talk about longevity, games played, wins, a driving force behind a team, like to make it competitive. Mm-hmm. And listen, there aren't too many players on that Stanley Cup team who you can say they would not have won that without that guy. Mm-hmm. Now, don't get me wrong, it was a team effort and everybody came together to win that Stanley Cup. But seriously, I mean, throw a name or two out there. If you're talking about a couple names that you don't win that Stanley Cup without, Jordan Binnington is probably number one on the list.
Has to be number one.
Has to be number one.
Yeah.
I mean, you can talk about an O'Reilly.
You don't make the playoffs without Jordan.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Absolutely.
that's the whole thing. I mean, you don't get past Winnipeg without Binnington stealing the show in the first couple of games. You don't beat Dallas in Game 7 of double overtime without Binnington making that save on Jamie Benn. You don't win the Stanley Cup in Game 7 in Boston without him making those saves. Like, I know there are Hall of Fame goaltenders that played for the St. Louis Blues, and there are incredible names in hockey tenures, but for the timestamp of what Jordan Binnington did, to where in 2018-2019 he took them from worst to first, 2019-2020 season they were the best team in the Western Conference, and I truly believe that if not for COVID, they would have been in the Stanley Cup final that season. The COVID pause, the bubble limited them, but then the next couple of seasons he hit a wall, or he had his stumbles, but still found a way to retake the net and help them win at certain points, and then they went into their down spiral. But I always ask the question, if COVID never happens, do they move on from all of these pieces, or do they continue that sustained winning? Jordan Binnington kept the team afloat for 7 years. And to me, that's with the Stanley Cup championship behind it, with a Four Nations victory, with the silver medal in the Olympics, with playing in the World Championships in the offseason. Like, to me, that's the best goaltender in franchise history.
And also one of my favorite personalities without a big personality that's like existed in my time in sports.
Oh, yeah.
Like, his personality is not big at all, but because it's not, it makes it a big personality.
Yeah.
It's freaking amazing.
Yeah,
man.
it's wild.
All right, so let's do this. Let's take our final break. I want to come back and just kind of wrap up with a couple of little things. All right, final segment, Last Minute Blues podcast coming your way next. All right, so guys, I wanted to ask you real quick here in the final segment. Just the other day, the Blues made an announcement. They signed collegiate free agent Felix Trudeau to a 2-year entry-level contract. And this guy had some really great numbers at Sacred Heart University, 6'2", 200 pounds. What do you guys know about this fella?
I thought you were going to ask, is he related to Justin Trudeau? That was my first question.
Justin Trudeau, very busy right now dating Katy Perry.
Well, so Felix might be related to that.
And also, too, before we get... That is one cool hockey name.
Trudeau.
Felix Trudeau. Dude, that's awesome.
It'd be worse if he was like from like California or something, right? Like, it's only cool that he's a Canadian player.
California, it would be a douchebag name, I think.
Yeah, speaking of the Prime Minister, though, did you hear Monty's answer on that? He was a little more outspoken. Yeah, he said that, who is it, Justin? Yeah. Not a great Prime Minister, but his dad was. It's like, we're getting Canadian politics. Canadian politics.
Politicking going on.
And Trudeau's not even the Prime Minister anymore. So he's like catching strays and
he's the prime Katy Perry right now.
Who's this guy?
I mean, this is the part that I was surprised by that.
We're saying all this stuff because we don't know.
Yeah, no, I had no idea. Yeah.
I love the honesty.
JR is spot on there. I don't know anything other than he can score goals at the collegiate level. I was more surprised that they signed him. When was the last time they signed a college free agent?
It's been a while. Well,
I mean,
who came
Mitch
in?
Rinke?
Mitch Rinke came in and played a game.
Did they do one after him? I don't think so.
Well, Snuggerud, but obviously a drafted guy.
Like an undrafted player. I couldn't think. I was looking at this the other day. I couldn't think the last time that the Blues did that. Like, typically Boston, Philly.
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
Those are the ones that always get these undrafted collegiate free agents. I was surprised by it, but I mean, hey, why not? You know, like in the way that they did it too, you get a PTO to where he goes into the minors, and then the next 2 years he's on an entry-level deal.
Yeah, so a couple things. I sent out a couple texts, and a lot of guys didn't know, that I talked to didn't know much about him. Where was the school?
Sacred Heart.
Yeah, I sent.
I didn't even know where that was.
Not a hockey powerhouse.
No.
I sent a text to one guy, and he said, yeah, Sacred Heart's not in my coverage area. I don't know.
Whose coverage area is it in?
Yeah, but there's a local guy, who does a quote unquote Substack, Mike Meyer, who does a good job with the prospects. And I think he's got a piece up about Felix, but I think that, scorer at the American Hockey League level, maybe a third line guy, in St. Louis if he gets here. But some decent numbers, but just don't know too much about him.
Still very surprised that with the Blues being 8-1-2 or something like that.
9-2-2.
9-2-2, that they are still fifth overall for the worst pick, or fifth worst record in the league.
This is why when people were getting up in arms, which I'll raise my hand, I was that person there. I was first. Okay, I voluntarily
the president of those people, Alex Ferrari.
I may have ran the fan club in terms of getting upset when they were winning games, but like at one point you just looked at it, you're like, guys, everyone else around them is winning. Like Vancouver won't, although they've picked up some wins. Calgary won't. Chicago has stayed right around where it's at, and the New York Rangers are right there. Like, teams will still win hockey games. So it's why when we were talking about them winning, it's like, well, what if they don't make the playoffs? Are they going to screw up their draft position? I just didn't think they were going to get to the 10th worst record in the National Hockey League because there were so many teams that were above them with a point cushion, and they're going to keep winning even if the Blues go on some type of run. So now what's interesting is the next couple of weeks, because they play San Jose twice and you play Toronto, if you pick up wins in those games, you might leapfrog them, so you move down a little bit. But then look at the month of April where you're playing Colorado twice and you've got Minnesota. Like, you've got difficult games. Those other teams play a little bit of a softer schedule than you do. So I think it plays itself out. I think you're going to float somewhere between the 4th and the 7th worst record in the National Hockey League.
Yeah, and that great article that Donnie read, I kind of spanned that. I said,
whose article was that, by the way?
I can't remember, but it was...
I didn't see it.
You could float, like you said, whatever, 4th through 7th. I mean, that's a difference between 3% chance at the number 1 overall pick to what?
I think it's 7 or 8%.
Yeah, 8 something.
Yeah, I think 8% is at the 5th overall pick. Yeah. Also, the Detroit Red Wings pick right now.
I was going to say.
That's the other one you need to keep an eye on. I've been watching more of that than I've been watching the Blues finish in the standings because they're dropping. They're 10th now in the Eastern Conference. I think their playoff chances are like 39%. So, like, you might actually have 2 picks in the draft lottery, 2 picks that could be top 15, or best case scenario could be top 10.
Yeah, and we talked about this before we started rolling here, is so the Blues, let's just say they finish with an 8% chance to get the number 1 overall pick. That's with their pick, right? So let's say Detroit misses the playoffs and they're 15th, 16th. There are 2 drawings for the number 1 overall pick, and then they... I say roll the dice.
Bounce the balls.
Bounce the balls.
Yep.
Yeah, they do it live because, it's not a rigged draft.
You got to stop
No,
that.
I'm telling you what's going to happen.
So there's 2 of them. So there's 1 for the number 1 and 1 for the number 2. So Detroit, with that pick, even though it's the Blues, I should say the Blues, that can jump to number 2 overall. So
depending on where Detroit finishes.
So if you're a Blues fan, May 5th is a date that you want to watch
May
this.
5th.
Because if Detroit misses out and the Blues somehow jump to 1 in Detroit, the Blues...
You could have McKenna and Stenberg.
How about that?
Can you imagine if you are a Detroit Red Wings fan and you miss the playoffs and then... you give away that high of a pick. Dude.
Yeah, I can't. It's the Toronto Maple Leafs that are missing the playoffs and giving it to Boston.
Absolutely. It's almost the same type of
That's
situation.
even worse because, I guess it's probably around the same piece to where they're rivals, but Detroit's not as much of a rival anymore, but Boston and Toronto's got to be worse.
All right, I want to throw this out there, and if somebody else has said this, I apologize. I'm not trying to steal your thunder. I love Jimmy Snuggerud. The nickname Snuggie is perfect.
Everyone loves a
Fantastic.
Snuggie.
Okay. But I think that we should have an additional nickname for that young man, and that is Jimmy Snipes.
Did he say if somebody has said that before?
Did somebody say that before?
I think in 2020. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. No.
I've never heard Jimmy Snipes. I like Snuggie more.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to throw it out there.
You were very excited about that,
I was and am, just because of just watching that dude and his freaking snipe. Like, it is unbelievable what that guy can do. And what I loved about, too, reading that in your article was his dad saying that it wasn't something that his shot is not something that he was gifted with. It's something that he worked his ass off for. And I thought that was really remarkable.
Al McInnes 2.0, right? Just wailing away on a garage door.
All right, so Jimmy Snipes out.
I feel like I've heard it. So when I say that, maybe I didn't. Maybe I dreamt it, because I did dream the other day that Craig Berube got fired, and it was not true. And it wasn't until I Googled it the next day.
Dreams of that.
I know. I just had a dream, but I felt like as Donnie was saying that, because I've heard Jimmy Snipes before. Yeah. That it was almost like he stopped the show. He paused everything. He goes, "Guys, for Stan Musial, I think they should call him the man." Stan the man. What do you guys think?
I'm just going to say this right now.
For Brett Hall, they should call him the Golden Brett.
I think I might have read it somewhere. I don't know. If you came up with it,
No.
ago,
I'm going to Google it.
Whoever did,
Nope.
I'm sorry.
Before we wrap this up, I'm just going to Google Jimmy Snipes and hope not anything dirty pops up. I'm on the work email, the Wi-Fi,
you're on the work Wi-Fi, so you better be careful.
Siri says it was invented by Donnie.
Well, see, Martin Kilcoyne put it out there that said Jimmy Snipes to join the Blues last year.
All right. There it is.
So now you're cherry picking nicknames. All right, that's it. It's gone.
But at least I quantified it by saying I might have heard it somewhere else.
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to make it my own.
You should have tried to make it your own. Look, you can't have a Snipes night at the rink. You can have a Snuggie night.
That's very, you know what? That's very
And
true.
I love me a good Snuggie.
Yeah, that's very, it just feels very warm.
And then at the end of a hockey game, you all throw Snuggies on the ice.
Seems like a mess for somebody else.
Come here, Alex.
No, different type of Snuggie.
All right, I think we're done. All right,
Jared's giving hugs. I'm out.
Last Minute Blues podcast is brought to you by Blue Note Roofing. Roofing, siding, and gutters. Your St. Louis roofing experts. Visit BlueNoteRoofingSTL.com for a free inspection. My homies, Jeremy Rutherford from The Athletic, Alex Ferrario from 101 ESPN. I'm Donnie Fandango. Thank you as always for listening and watching our podcast. We love it and we appreciate it so much. And as always, let's go Blues.
The Last Minute Blues podcast on 101 ESPN.
Is presented by Blue Note Roofing. Roofing, siding, and gutters. Your St. Louis roofing experts. Visit BlueNoteRoofingSTL.com for free inspection.